We are in tune to nature, and the body can respond to those influences. So we know there's a circadian rhythm when we talk about the rising of the sun, the setting of the sun, and how that can affect and be a stressor on the body. And we see that sometimes we have people in the evening time, they can't go to sleep.
Right.
And then if they do fall asleep, they're waking up between 2 and 4 in the morning. So that is an issue too. So let's actually move into a third stressor when it comes to blood sugar balancing and glycemic dysregulation. And a lot of this goes with the standard American diet, which has been dogma and preached from both the government and all these major corporations that run the mill of food that is produced to the U.S. And we talk about standard American diet, that's SAD. That is very sad.
Sad. I love that. Sad. It is sad. But that's what I grew up on. Luckily, I ate at home a lot. But once like almost every other human being, what's the first thing you do when you get your own money? You start eating at fast food restaurants because you're out on your own. The problem with that is that most people never grow up. They never actually move out of that phase to where they're just not eating candy and fast food all the time. That becomes their diet, and that's what they exist on for basically the rest of their life.
Yeah, they do. And we also realize the standard American diet, you have artificial flavors, colors, industrial seed oils, which are very inflammatory. A lot of the simple sugars, the wheat, it actually spikes the blood sugar. And what happens 2 hours later? The blood sugar crashes. A typical American breakfast. A bowl of cereal that's artificially flavored. Milk, orange juice, a bagel. I mean, these are simple carbs that break down very quickly. And again, what does that do to your cortisol level? Your blood sugar shoots up, then drops. And then to respond, your body says, hey, I need a quick fix. And what's that quick fix usually? Sugar, more caffeine. And you get that, then in response, your cortisol is going to produce a lot more cortisol to keep the sugar so it doesn't completely crash to going into a low blood sugar state.
Right. That's it's fascinating about the blood sugar issue because if you follow health like obviously we do, the last 6 or 8 years they've really come to realize that most of your health conditions, the chronic ones, center around your blood sugar.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Just everything is hinged on that and how it creates inflammation, how it drains your energy, and how it sets you up for chronic disease. All this talk about metabolic syndrome, they're really just talking about blood sugar.
They're talking about blood sugar and inflammation. That's what it comes down to. And there's been this huge movement in the last, 5-10 years, and even more recently, ketogenic, the paleo movement, which is a big focus on eating animal products, healthy vegetables, low glycemic fruits, and keeping those high glycemic, high carb, industrialized seed oils, keep it more organic, grass-fed as a way of living, and actually balancing out all these health problems. Because we realize a lot of these health issues we're seeing today, cardiometabolic syndrome, heart disease, even cancer, diabetes, it has a lot to do with diet and what we put in our mouth.
Right. The big statistic that I always like to remind people of that shocked me was on the blood sugar issue, that they now know that the average person, if their blood sugar shoots up to 140 to 150 after a meal, which for everybody is just the norm,
it is.
That's eating fast food, it probably goes way beyond that. Well, in that 3 hours, it takes your body to down-regulate that to somewhat near normal. You've doubled your chance of having a heart attack or a stroke.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Now, when you think about that, it's happening 3 times a day for most people. And a lot of people never fall out of that number. So they've got a double chance of having a heart attack and stroke for most of the day. So this is why heart disease is the number one killer. This is why it's up, because of that elevated blood sugar, yet hardly anybody focuses on it at all.
Yeah, how true is that? And even in conventional medicine, which is where I'm trained, the focus is not on any lifestyle prevention at all. Maybe we may have an hour or two class with regard to nutrition. Okay, you're diabetic, don't eat sugar, okay?
Right.
You have heart disease, we got to get your cholesterol down. Don't eat fat foods. Eat low low calorie, low fat foods. And we know this is a completely incorrect, and there's a huge paradigm shift with that. But we'll get that a little bit more specifically. I think that gives us a big overview. And one more stressor on the body, let's look at inflammation with regard to parasites, environmental toxins, EMF, over-exercising. These are some things we can talk about which are also a chronic stressor on the body, which we don't think about typically. It's usually, again, the perceived stress.
Right. All these things cause a stress response. It's fascinating to me that EMFs aren't in the news more than they are, and I think that's just because, again, what is it related to? Industry. Industry doesn't like any news to go out that looks like it might hurt their personal economy. And so that's what shapes our news and the information we get. Yet we're exposed to so many energy fields. And if you think about it, for the first, few 100,000 years of our existence, depending on how old you think people have been on the planet, but we were never exposed to any energy field except for the earth.
Except for the earth, and that's where the grounding is. And now we actually have all these other EMFs. So let's discuss briefly what EMFs are and how that can be a stressor to the body. Then we'll focus back in on the autoimmune. But I think it's important to address stress because it is such a huge component. 70 to 80+% of people going in to see a practitioner, the doctor, naturopath, whoever it ends up being, there's a stress component.
There is a stress.
And this is not addressed. And stress is so very important to address for that.
So the EMFs, which are electrical magnetic fields, right? They will have the greatest impact on someone who's unhealthy. This is very fascinating to me because I know we're going to talk about yoga and meditation, but yoga, meditation, going to church, all these different ancient techniques. In fact, every religion worldwide 2,000 years ago, what did they do? They had their service, their first day, 5 o'clock in the morning. Before the sun come up. Before the sun come up, you got up and you did either a meditation, you did a yoga, you went to church. It was all some form of that. And what was that about? It was to focus your mind on something bigger than yourself and your daily stress.
Absolutely.
But it also sets your energy for the entire day.
So this is very similar to setting intentions for the day.
Setting intentions.
So when you're setting intentions, if it is you get up, there's gratitude, there's love, how much easier is your day going to go? How is that going to affect your stress level, putting you in a parasympathetic rest and digest state? How important is that?
It changes your perception of every situation you're in during the day. And I talk about this with stress a lot because most people think, well, I'm stressed, I got to lower my stress hormone. Well, that's a small part of it, right? The other part is changing your brain so that you perceive stressors differently. And in that state of energy, just like we were talking about going to a service or doing a meditation at 5 in the morning, setting your brain up energetically changes the way you perceive stressful situations. Once you do that, you have less stressors. The stressors you have last a much shorter period of time, and your body goes easily into the healing phase where it just corrects everything. Because getting stressed isn't that big a deal.
It isn't.
It's a natural part of life. But the recovery thing is what we're all missing.
Right. And not all stress is bad. We kind of give it this negative connotation. It can be, but realize there's something called hormesis, which are positive stressors on the body, which actually build resiliency. And that can be exercise. That can be with intermittent fasting. That can be with taking cold showers. That can be with having relationships and community. And that actually builds your resilience. And we always think stress, bad. That's not always the case.
No. We're talking about how you react to stress.
That's correct.
How you let it go. Stress, really, if you're in the right frame of mind, you can turn almost any stressful situation into a very short-term thing that you just learned something from. Your body goes into recovery. You move on.
And you move on.
You move on, and it's done.
It is done. Yeah. So again, just a quick wrap up with stress. Now, we discussed 4 types of stress. The first one is perceived mental stress. How your body reacts from past experiences. Is there novelty to it? Is it something new? And how that affects your physiology. That's the first thing. The second is circadian rhythm, or how our bodies are in tune to the rising and the setting of the sun, and some of the hormones that are involved there. The third thing has to do with glycemic blood sugar regulation, another stressor, and how that affects so many other, what we call in Western medicine, disease states, whether it be metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, even things like that. And the fourth one are some of those hidden things which we talked about. Now let's transition into where we're initially talking about with autoimmunity, because we know stress is a huge component to any disease process. But with autoimmunity, there's something called the autoimmune spectrum, which we're realizing autoimmunity just does not happen overnight. There's a period, depending which disease state you're given a name for, it may happen 10, 20, 30 years beforehand,
right,
without having any symptoms at all.
Yeah, it's very fascinating, because when you get into autoimmunity, you naturally fall over into diet. You naturally fall over into gluten issues, right? And I remember 10 years ago, I was giving a talk somewhere, and a lady came up, and she had been compiling research on gluten for 5 years. And at that point, nobody even really talked about gluten. It was a new thing. But she told me something that I know today is completely true, is that when you eat something that you're allergic to, you have a stress response, just like an emotional stressor. So if you're having emotional stress, eating things that cause a stressor to your body,
stress responds, and we're talking about stress eating, and you're having a reaction to that.
So anything you're allergic to, you're automatically in a stress response. So your emotional stressors are going to be so much worse, because your body's just set up for it. And this is what I talk about this all the time. You want to set yourself up for having a different experience. And that's not just, how your brain chemistry is or anything else. It has to do with your diet. It has to do with your sleep, circadian rhythm.
Absolutely.
If you're not paying attention to that, the rise and fall of how all these energies move in your body, then you're going to be in a position to have experienced more emotional stress from a situation that shouldn't have bothered you much at all.
Oh, absolutely. And we realize the spectrum of autoimmunity, we have 10, 20, 30 years before it actually presents with symptoms.
Right.
And then there is this middle ground where you start having symptoms. You go to your doctor with these symptoms, and oftentimes it's a 7 to 9 year time before they can actually diagnose you. And by then, you have all this potential damage to your body because the body is attacking itself. And we realize, again, the genetic predisposition, but that only accounts for a third of those people that are actually diagnosed, which is crazy. So you don't have to have a genetic predisposition. Say like your mother, your sister, brother may have lupus, may have MS, may have inflammatory bowel disease, Reiter syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis. It doesn't mean you're going to get it. You may not even have that genetic factor, but yet we realize the gut and environmental factors can be the triggers. So we talk about epigenetics. When we talk about genetics, that's what you're inherited, your inheritance, okay? And what epigenetics is, the things that happen outside of the cell. If you do have a genetic predisposition, it can trigger and turn on those genes.
Well, this is, again, one of the things that fascinates me about functional medicine. And I know if I told you this, but I wish I would have found out about functional medicine like 15 years ago, just for my own study. Because now I study it, and on my own. But what I like, again, is how it correlates with Chinese medicine, and the fact that someone comes to you, and you know this, someone tells you they have something, you go, you got anything for it? Because they just want one herb or one pill for it, right? Well, the reality is that you probably have one issue going on, but you have 7 other things that medicine, normal, Western medicine's treating you for, that are just symptoms of the one thing you never took care of 15 years ago.
And that's the underlying.
And if you took care of the underlying, the next time I'd see you, like a month or so later, you wouldn't have probably 75% of those other 7 things because they just disappear. They're just something that crops up.
Absolutely. So we know health problems, disease states are not in isolation.
No.
Okay? The blood goes through the whole body. And so we know from a cellular standpoint, even autoimmunity, it's going to affect every other part of the body. You just don't have a cholesterol problem. You just don't have a blood sugar problem. You just don't, it's affecting other organs.
Right.
But again, conventional medicine just focuses on that one thing.